Commissioner Gordon. Bane has escaped.
You do not chase what you cannot name. You do not build what you cannot sketch. And you will never own what you've never dared to possess mentally. The first thief of a man's future is not his enemy, not even the world. It is the absence of precision in the mind. A dull mental image of success is no different than blindness. You want transformation, but you never drew the lines of what you want transformed. You say more, but more of what? You say better, but better where? What isn't measured in mental architecture will never be manifested in your physical one. The tragedy is not that men fail. The tragedy is they never defined what success looked like with such obsessive clarity that the body had no choice but to obey. You don't suffer from a lack of ambition, you suffer from an untrained projector. You have pixels of potential scattered across a screen, never aligned into one image, powerful enough to pull your entire life into orbit. The reason the world applauds results is because they cannot comprehend blueprints. They cannot see what you see because they refuse to live where you live, in the invisible. The majority of people are not reacting to reality, they're reacting to habit. Habit of thought, habit of identity, habit of playing small. But when you break that, when you begin to take mental imagery seriously, you disrupt the very software that writes the code of your daily existence. And once your operating system is rewritten, you no longer move through life guessing. You move as one who already knows. The room feels different when you walk in. Not because they understand your vision, but because your entire nervous system has already visited this room in your sleep. The handshake, the eye contact, the breath before your name is called. You rehearsed it. Now your presence doesn't ask permission. It declares arrival. That's not confidence, it's pre-visualized inevitability. Before you build anything in the world, you build the authority to do so, not in titles, not in applause, but in mental weight, the kind that is forged by repetition in solitude. You don't convince others you're capable, you convince your subconscious that you already are. The moment you do that, the external world becomes a formality. Vision is not just belief, it's identity rehearsal. You're not imagining the finished line. You're stepping into the role of the one who crosses it. Most never make the transition from daydreamer to architect because they treat vision as a fantasy instead of a responsibility. But the ones who do, those who walk for months or years with a single clear image dominating their every step, they don't just win. They change landscapes. And when they arrive, they don't celebrate. They recognize, because they've already lived it again and again and again. That is not visualization, that is mental pre-construction. Every reality you envy was once invisible. Every skyscraper, every billion-dollar empire, every movement that made history, it all started in silence. And what silence gives birth to? Only the disciplined can deliver. You have to understand this. The mind is not a sandbox. It's a weaponized factory. It doesn't play, it builds. And the moment you realize that every thought you keep feeding it is becoming wiring, you start to filter what you allow. You don't speak lightly. You don't joke about failure. You don't hope. You instruct. You rehearse. You frame. That is the behavior of a visionary, not someone waiting for luck, but someone stacking blueprints in the dark, brick by mental brick, knowing that every clear image becomes behavioral gravity. The world will call you obsessed. Let them. Obsession is just the name the uncertain give to those who won't negotiate with fog. It's not the loud that win, it's the clear. Clarity silences noise even from across the battlefield. Clarity cuts through confusion like a blade through smoke. But here's the paradox. The clearer your vision becomes, the lonelier your journey gets. because most people bond through uncertainty. They relate through doubt. But when you begin to sculpt your future with surgeon-level focus, you intimidate the ones still sketching with crayons. You weren't born to blend, you were born to construct. And construction is loud to the untrained mind, even if you say nothing. Your aura will speak, your posture will say what your words do not. And that's what separates the vague from the victorious. The blueprint in your mind will either be a crown or a coffin, but it will become something. What you do next decides which. People speak of grit and discipline as if they were born from effort. They're not. They're born from vision. Because nothing sustains brutal effort like a future so vivid that quitting would feel like dying. Most people break not from pain but from disorientation. They stop because they no longer remember what they were building. That's why you revisit the vision every morning. Not to fantasize, but to calibrate. Every rep, every sacrifice, every delayed gratification must report to a commander. That commander is your mental image. If it's strong, you'll suffer well. If it's weak, you'll suffer blind. When you suffer blind, you negotiate, you hesitate, you fold. But when every bead of sweat lands inside the frame you've already seen 1,000 times in your head, you don't complain, you confirm. Because this is not pain, it's down payment. If you think in fog, you act in fragments, and fragmented action builds scattered lives. That's why clarity is a moral obligation. It's not about aesthetics, it's about accuracy. The man with vague intentions will spend years in rooms that drain him, jobs that kill him, relationships that blur him. He's not cursed. He's just unclear. And the cost of that lack of vision is everything that was meant to be his. Not by destiny, but by design. If your mental design is broken, your life will be an endless loop of almosts and maybes. But when the design is detailed, the mind becomes a map. And the body doesn't resist. It obeys. Not because you're strong, but because you're certain. And in a world drowning in doubt, certainty is violence. The mistake most people make is waiting to believe until they see. That's cowardice dressed as logic. The mind doesn't wait for proof. It creates the conditions for proof to arrive. You don't think because it's real, you think it real. That's the unseen revolution. You live the result before the world does. That's why you walk different. That's why you speak like you already got it. Because to you it's already happened. It's not ego, it's engineering. You're not pretending. You're pre-living, and every repetition of that mental reality etches new grooves into your identity. That's why things start to feel strange when you regress, because your nervous system is already tied to a higher standard, one you built, one you fed, one you committed to in silence while they were still asking for permission. There's a reason they mock visionaries. Because a man who builds inside his head is a threat to every system that profits off his confusion. That's why they distract you. That's why they flood your senses. Not because they fear your dreams, but because they fear your focus. A focused mind breaks chains without ever raising a fist. A focused mind outpaces talent, dismantles status, and rewrites trajectory without asking. That's why your only job is to see it clearly, daily, religiously. Not once, not sometimes, every single day, until your reality blurs into the architecture of your own making. Because once you see it that often, that sharply, that violently, there's no going back. Your body will rebel against anything less. And the world eventually will comply. Before anything legendary is built, it lives inside a draft. Not a rough idea, not a flicker, a prototype. a detailed, deliberate preview of what the world is about to meet. No builder lays a foundation until they've stared into the schematics long enough to memorize the final structure. The architect doesn't guess, they design. They sketch every angle of the vision before the first brick even tastes daylight. The same law applies to success. It is never an accident. It is never luck. It is a deliberate construction, rehearsed in the invisible until the physical becomes inevitable. The reason most never reach what they claim to want is because they never created the blueprint. They wander around chasing an outcome they haven't even seen yet. That's not ambition, that's delusion. True success is a prototype walked through so many times in the mind that the world starts to bend around it. Look around you. Everything you touch was first drawn. On paper, on a napkin, in a sleepless brain burning with vision. Nobody manufactures greatness by improvisation. It's prototype, tested, challenged, refined, and before that it's seen. You don't launch a car without sketches. You don't send a rocket without simulations. Why do you think your future is any different? Every high performer, every empire builder, every silent assassin of average, they all understand this law. They run the play in their head 1,000 times before the field ever calls their name. They don't just have a goal, they have angles, they have colors, they have emotional textures embedded in the outcome. They don't just want to win, they know what it looks like to win. That difference, that's what makes the hand reach for what the mind has already owned. Clarity is the only currency the subconscious accepts. If you don't pay it with detail, it doesn't work. You can chant affirmations, whisper mantras, hang vision boards on your wall, but if the internal projector is running static, your body won't follow. Because biology does not respond to hope, it responds to rehearsal. Think about the military. The soldier trains in simulation, not because they enjoy pretend war, but because the nervous system must get familiar with the scenario before it can dominate it. In your life, you are the soldier. And if you haven't practiced the battlefield in your mind, don't expect precision when it's live. Vision, when practiced properly, is not fantasy, it's behavioral code. The prototype is not for play, it's for war. A rehearsal so precise that when the lights go on, you don't perform, you remember. Most people confuse dreaming with designing, but they're different realms. Dreaming floats, designing forms. Dreaming tickles the mind with possibility, designing instructs it. There's a reason architects don't sketch in fog, because fog doesn't frame futures. You need lines, you need structure, you need the kind of clarity that makes distraction impossible. That's why the prototype matters. Because when it lives in your head with structure, your body will move with structure. Your calendar won't be chaos. Your actions won't be impulsive, because everything will serve the image. It's like coding. What you program is what you execute. The prototype is your mental programming language. If it's vague, your life will crash. If it's clean, your life will run like a system designed for performance. Stop trying to manifest, start prototyping. The lie that ruins potential is this: just get started. No. Starting blindly builds broken systems. Starting without vision creates wasted motion. Before you get started, get clear. That's the step most skip, and that's why they're always starting again. The prototype prevents the loop. It tells your actions where to go, your emotions what to ignore, and your identity what to absorb. Clarity is not a luxury, it's a lever. Pull it, and everything else moves in alignment. Refuse to sketch your future and you'll wake up inside someone else's system. Lost, drained, confused. Because without your own image, you'll default to the loudest one near you. That's how people become pawns, by skipping the mental draft. And the world, it doesn't hand you what you missed. It punishes you for pretending it didn't matter. The elite don't wait for proof, they create frames. They don't operate on motivation, they operate on blueprints, and every action is backed by an image so sharp, so specific, that momentum is no longer accidental. They don't hope it works out. They build until it has no choice but to collapse into form. And that clarity, that's what turns 4 a.m. alarms into obsession. That's what makes rest feel like betrayal. Because when the prototype is vivid enough, nothing feels like sacrifice. It feels like construction. You are not giving things up. You are laying bricks. And every brick was already placed in your head, days, months, years before the world saw the first layer. That's how builders think. That's how greatness is framed. You can't measure progress if you never defined completion, and most never define it. That's why they chase. That's why they spiral. That's why every month feels like a rerun, because they are attempting to climb a staircase they never counted. The prototype solves this. When it's clear, your steps become measured. You don't just act, you track. You don't just hustle, you align. Because now, every move is either reinforcing the vision or violating it. There is no gray, just math, just structure, just sacred alignment between what you saw and what you're doing. And when that alignment locks in, momentum is no longer fragile, it's automated. And automation, that's the kingdom of the focused. You ever wonder why the most disciplined people seem possessed? It's not discipline. It's vision lodged so deeply into their nervous system that anything outside of it feels offensive. That's what the prototype does. It infects you. It makes distraction feel like treason. It makes every decision filter through one question: does this build or break the picture I've already drawn? That's the filter that protects your future. Not willpower, not luck, just violent loyalty to a prototype that refuses to fade. And the more you feed it, the more it feeds you. Energy, direction, relentless self-correction. The prototype becomes your mirror, and you either reflect it or betray it, and you will feel both. The greatest part? Once the image becomes habit, the work becomes second nature. Not easy, inevitable. Because when you've prototyped something deeply enough, your entire life gets infected by the echo of that sketch. Your thoughts start sounding like blueprints, your conversations shift, your standards evolve. You begin to repel anything that doesn't match the draft. That's when you've gone from fantasizing to engineering. That's when your walk becomes prophecy. Because your every step is no longer exploratory, it's a retrieval mission. You're not hoping to find it. You're going to get what's already been built. And in that state, motivation dies. You don't need it. The prototype is pulling you, day by day, inch by inch. Confidence is not lightning. It does not strike you in a moment of luck. It is not gifted by applause or stolen from another man's success. Confidence is not an energy you summon. It is a consequence you earn. And the root of that consequence? Familiarity. The mind trusts what it has seen before. Not always physically, but mentally, repeatedly. Enough times that the image no longer feels foreign, and once it's familiar, the body starts acting like it belongs there. This is why people freeze when they face opportunity. They've never rehearsed being inside the win. So the body panics, the voice shakes, the presence vanishes, not because they lack potential, but because the scenario feels alien. The man who feels at home in victory is the one who built the blueprint and visited it often. He's not surprised. He's just arriving. Familiarity is the rehearsal of ownership, and without it, every win feels like trespassing, every success feels like theft. That's why imposter syndrome haunts people who rise faster than they imagined. They never saw it often enough to believe it. Their biology rejects the new altitude. That's not humility. That's unreadiness. You are only ever truly confident in what you've mentally sat with, lived inside, breathed with, rehearsed under pressure. That's the difference between speaking well and commanding a room, between trying and executing. Confidence is not boldness. It's recognition. The moment comes, and you don't flinch. Because you've lived it in the shadows so many times, your hands know what to do before your brain catches up. That's not magic. That's embedded memory. That's prototype turned performance. Repetition is not redundant, it is ritual. And the highest form of discipline is mental repetition. You think brushing your teeth daily matters? Try brushing your vision every morning. Try rehearsing the win in detail until it becomes part of your posture. Not once, not for hype, every day, because the mind is trained by exposure. You don't build courage by seeking danger. You build it by removing novelty, and novelty only fades when the image becomes familiar. The unfamiliar is interpreted as threat, the familiar as territory. That's how imagination becomes conquest, not through volume, through rhythm, through ceremony. You don't just imagine success, you install it. Like a dominant song you play until it becomes background music, and then one day you start dancing without noticing. Most people never act, not because they doubt the goal, but because the steps are foreign. They never saw themselves closing the deal, never imagined saying the words in the right tone, never envisioned navigating the pressure. So when the moment arrives, they collapse, not from fear, but from shock. But those who win, they've already lived the steps. Their rhythm is already in motion. Their vision has drilled the path so deeply that action is no longer a choice, it's reflex. And when action becomes reflex, resistance dies. Because now, you're not negotiating with doubt. You're executing muscle memory. The kind of memory built not in sweat, but in silence, in repetition, in invisible rehearsals where no one is watching, but everything is being wired. Confidence is not loud, it is silent certainty forged in unseen reps. It is the side effect of familiarity. And familiarity is built like a fortress, brick by repetition, shielded by clarity. You don't earn it by waiting for applause, you earn it by sitting with the vision longer than anyone else. You walk through it so many times in your head that by the time the world opens the gate, you are already standing there with your hands on the handle. You don't knock, you walk in. Because you've rehearsed the arrival, you've mapped the walls, you've heard the echo of your own footsteps in the hall of your future. That's not confidence, that's alignment. That's sovereignty built in private. You ever watch a lion walk? It does not roar to remind the jungle who it is. It moves like it belongs, not because it's aggressive, but because it's familiar. That terrain has been walked. That environment has been memorized. That's what confidence looks like. It's not brashness, it's belonging. You don't shout to prove you're ready, you move like you've already claimed it. And the secret? You have in your mind, over and over. So by the time you touch the actual stage, it's no longer a debut, it's déjà vu. That's the cheat code. Confidence is just the residue of visualization, and the world bows to those who carry certainty without asking for permission. You don't break fear by fighting it. You break fear by removing its fuel, unfamiliarity. You shrink hesitation by expanding rehearsal. When your nervous system has lived through an outcome 10,000 times in detail, fear doesn't vanish. It becomes irrelevant. Because you're not engaging with fear anymore, you're bypassing it. Confidence takes over because the system defaults to the most rehearsed outcome. And if what's most rehearsed is clarity, preparation, and presence, then that's exactly what shows up. This is how imagination becomes performance. Not through inspiration, through training, through neural imprinting, through daily immersion in the version of you that already owns the result. That's not a dream. That's discipline with direction. Think about athletes who visualize the race before it starts. That's not superstition. It's neurological training. Because the body, when exposed to vivid repetition, begins to interpret the imagined as familiar. And when it's familiar, hesitation dies. That's why the best don't second guess. They've already run the play in their heads. They've already missed, corrected, and finished.